Great. So this is going to be our panel discussion for Wilder Than Wild. So today we've got the filmmakers of the documentary, Stephen Most and Kevin White. We also have Elizabeth Azuz from the URAC Cultural Fire Management Council, who we saw on the film. And then we also have Humboldt Bay Fire Battalion Chief Nick Lannis, which I'm sorry if I pronounced your last name wrong. Thank you guys for joining us. I really appreciate it. I think this will be important to a lot of people. So thank you for taking the time to meet with us. So I'm going to start with Stephen and Kevin. What inspired you to make this film? What was the kind of impetus for your film?
Well, I guess first I would just like to thank Corin. I'd like to thank you very much for hosting this, and to the Humboldt Library. Also want to acknowledge California Humanities for sponsoring this program. I think here we are in 2021, and when we started the film, it was 2014. And I don't think we had an idea that high severity wildfire would become so prevalent so quickly back then. And even since we released the film in 2018, it's just really not, obviously we're the number of fires and the acreage being consumed is just unprecedented. So we started this film because we wanted to kind of, acknowledge that when we saw the Rim Fire, which back then was one of California's largest fires, and it just kind of piqued our interest that this phenomenon of megafires, or so-called megafires, was going to grow. I don't think we would know that it was going to grow to this level that it has now. But the point is that we felt like there was a real need to understand the dynamics of wildfire, and actually a really important, we wanted to create a tool that would be something that communities could use to start to rethink their relationship to wildfire, to start to think about how they can manage wildfire in their communities, particularly those communities that are prone to wildfire. So we felt like we wanted to kind of do this Wildfire 101 film, and we had done a short film, and it was just kind of inadequate to look at all the issues. And so then we decided to do a longer film. And I'm pleased to say that it's gotten great traction, and that we've actually also been on PBS and probably had, I'm sure we're up to like 600 broadcasts. So we really wanted to get a film that would kind of help the public understand what the issues are, and kind of start to give folks a tool to start to, create discussion and to have an opportunity to discuss this in substantive ways within their communities.
I'll just put where we are historically into some perspective. When we began the film, we saw that there was an increasing number of mega fires of high severity with more than 100,000 acres burned. Many states had their largest wildfire ever in this century. And in California, which started recording wildfire size in the 1930s, of the 20 largest fires, 17 had occurred in this century. Well, and the Rim Fire, almost 250,000 acres, was a very large one, the largest forest fire when we looked at it. But now, if you look at the 10 largest wildfires in California history, 5 of them occurred last year. Mm-hmm. And the acreage that has burned already this year is 3 times the amount that burned through July last year. The major fires began in August and September, which are typically drier months, but the forests became extremely dry very early this year. So I think we need to be alert to what can happen in the rest of this year. And one of the things that we're looking forward to is having communities look proactively to what they can do to their emergency communication systems, to their evacuation procedures, but also to think of themselves as communities rather than as separate people in houses, because when wildfires occur, you really need to think of your neighbors. And there's one figure in the film that I wanted to highlight with that regard. The Santa Rosa fire, the wine country wildfires in 2017. The film says that 9,000 structures burned and 44 people died. Well, that's a tremendous loss of life. But compare those two figures, 9,000 homes mainly, and 44 people. We talked to people who had banged on doors. They knew who needed help to get away, people who didn't have cars, people who were infirm. So one of the reasons we've been doing community screenings is so that people can address wildfire as communities and understand that we're all in this together and that the issue, the danger is growing.
Thank you. So my next question is for Elizabeth and Nick. And Elizabeth, we're having some issues connecting to your video, but I'm hoping you can unmute yourself. So in the film, it talks about how a lot of the social kind of message about fires that had gone out over the years is that all fires are bad, you know, the Smokey the Bear, all of that kind of stuff. So, and saying that, you know, sometimes fire is good. So in your experience working with fires in communities, when is all fire bad? Is some fire good? And for prescription burns, how do you make that choice of when to do a prescription burn? What are the sort of elements that need to be in place to make it successful?
Yes, good morning. Thank you everyone for having me. For us, we burn twice a year, in the spring and the fall. They are planned burns. We plan all year long for 2 burns. It basically takes into account the weather, you know, the wind, you know, what it's like. You know, we monitor all year long our units. And when we go out into these units, we walk them prior to burning. Our spring burn is the one that we call a floating window. That floating window gives us the ability to determine if there are animals birthing, if there's anything going on in our units. Because if there's any animals that are going to be birthing, hatching, or doing anything, we're going to postpone or cancel that burn completely. You know, we don't have the right to affect nature in any way other than its own life cycle. You know, we think that fire is family. So for us, you know, we work with our family. We make an effort to understand and evolve and develop with that. So it's really interesting for me to hear that, you know, fire is bad. Well, yeah, fire can be bad. It can be dangerous. And in the wrong hands, you know, it's disastrous. We had an incident last night where there was an arson here on our reservation, and it took an hour and a half for the Forest Service to respond to the call that I put out at midnight. However, the volunteer fire department did show up, and, you know, after the Forest Service did arrive, informed them that they would not be paid for maintenance could arrive. It's something we really need to work on as a people. You know, when someone shows up to help a community, to help people out, we need to make every effort to reciprocate their, you know, good deeds, really, because, you know, there are so many fire agencies that are out there working themselves to the bone, and they deserve to be recognized, and they deserve to, you know, have the same respect as the Forest Service or CAL FIRE or any other fire agency. You know, they're all there to help. So for us, this is really important work, you know, to restore our environment, to take care of our animals, our water, you know, and we say our, and I mean all of us, every last one of us humans on this planet has an obligation to care for our planet, because otherwise we'll have nowhere to live.
And Nick, I know Humboldt Bay Fire deals more with kind of the urban areas where people live, but is there sort of like good fire in your jurisdiction?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me. I'm really excited to be here. I watched the film on Wednesday night and thought it was very well done. It's important, you know, to recognize that the past 100 years where we've had Smokey the Bear saying that all fire is bad, you know, in my mind, fire is like a chainsaw or a vehicle. It's a tool, and it can be bad or it can be good, but most of the time it's really in the context of kind of where that happens. I will say that, you know, inside of a structure or residence or something, the only good fire is on your stovetop or in the fireplace, right? And that's not really kind of what we're talking about here. Is we're talking more about that in the vegetation, in the wildland setting. Our area being right on the coast, it doesn't tend to burn very good. Our burning windows are very, very small, but we do tend to have some areas where we do interact with fire in the vegetation, and we're always looking at a way to make it, to apply fire as a benefit tactically to achieve suppression in a way that's going to benefit everything, whether it's adding a little bit more to make a straighter fire line, or extending into another area so that we can control that and reduce the hazard in the future. I did work for the state in the very beginning of my career about 20 years ago. I just missed the rim fire, I think, although my organization that I currently work with, we'd sent some units out there to assist with that stuff. Yeah, I think to answer your question, no, all fire is not bad, but I think that the messaging needs to be very carefully put out there to people so that not everybody's thinking that they should just put fire on the ground. And on these larger fires, particularly too, I mean, like Elizabeth was saying, there's a lot of factors that come into play when you're making a plan to put fire on the ground, because it could have some pretty disastrous consequences. But I have seen fire put on the ground at a large wildland fire, which then protected structures and saved lives. So, you know, again, it's more that context of what it's used, or whether it's good or bad. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, thank you. And in the film, there was discussion about how effects of climate change have increased both the fires and the intensity of fires. So I guess, Nick, have you noticed there's been an increase over the last couple decades has elements of climate change also affected fires in urban areas as much as it has in wildlife or wildfire areas?
Yeah, we're talking in my jurisdiction, the difference is more of magnitude than of frequency. So we're not, you know, we might not have access to these larger areas of land which could burn like we've seen in other areas of the state. We do butt up against some of those areas, so we could be expected to be there first or second, you know, to see that. But yeah, historically, what we've seen is the window for active fire behavior and the fire season has gotten larger and larger and larger, mainly due to these you know, what we call a time lag effect, where your fuels, when the weather is hot historically, like in now July and early August, the weather's hot and the humidities are low, but the larger fuels, the trees and the larger kind of down dead fuels, they're still pretty moist from the winter and springtime rains, and they don't really become receptive until that heat is sort of acted on it like an oven throughout the summer, which is typically why you start to see some of your bigger fires in the fall, the late summer or the early fall. But then it's kind of there's kind of a benefit there too, because you have your daytime hours getting to be less, and maybe the chance for more cooler temperatures, higher relative humidities, and even precipitation, which could stop those smaller fires from getting established into those larger fuels and then getting out of control. So with you know, extended heat waves and particularly the water situation, you're seeing a lot of your fuel moistures, and especially the live fuel moistures, become critically low earlier and earlier into the summer. And so your fire season becomes much, much longer.
Thank you. For Elizabeth, in the film that discussed how the tribe working with CAL FIRE, how has that relationship affected how you've been able to do prescription burns? What are some of the effects that you've noticed with that relationship? And how's that relationship still going? Is it, do you see a strong future, or what do you see like happening in the future between CAL FIRE and the tribe?
Working relationship with CAL FIRE. We have been able to sit at the table with them, talk about what's happening in this area. And in the beginning, they did come out and work with us. Now they sign our permits, they come out, they check our units. They rarely send out a crew or even the inmate crews any longer. We're at a position where we're 8 years into our nonprofit. We've never, knock on wood, lost a fire. They are very well executed events that we, bring people from all over the world to work with us, to train our participants, to become firelighters, working with suppression firefighters, because, their intention is to put that fire out, to get it out as fast as possible. Our intention is to let it, burn at different intensities for food, medicine, restoration of the land, the prairies, the meadows. We burn down into riparian areas, and they have been really supportive of our work. We're actually partnered with CAL FIRE for close to $1 million grant for a 5-year project to work on the 169 corridor that historically had up to 80 arsons in a year. And about 2 years in, it dropped down to 60. And at 3 years, it dropped down to 20. And now we're down to just a handful, if at all. But that comes with educating the community, working with the fire agency so that we're all on the same page. There's none of us trying to step on each other's toes. We're all trying to come to the same goal.
And are there other tribes that work with CAL FIRE, or is this unique just to Yurok?
The Karuk tribe is also working with CAL FIRE. They also put on training exchanges in the Orleans area. We have participated with them. We do cooperative burns where we all get together. Anytime we have a burn window, we can get together with a team that's been created through these training exchanges and pull off some well-executed prescribed burns that help with elder structure protection of our school that, we want to preserve. Mm-hmm. So it's the communication between agencies that is so important. You need to be at the table. We all need to have an input so that we all come to the same goal.
Okay, thank you. Let's see, for Kevin and Stephen, what were some things that you, in the making of the film, that you learned, or maybe some ideas that you unlearned while making the film?
I would say first and foremost, this notion that fire is not the enemy. It's maybe the most important line in the film is that this is a human problem, that we all have to take responsibility for this. And I see in the chat, several folks have, commented that as climate change, creates a warmer, drier, planet, we are in a situation where the urgency is pretty profound. And I think one of the things we learned was that when we were filming the rim fire, it was kind of the tip of the iceberg. And that I think, we are really needing to the urgency to really how we live with wildfire sustainably is, just gathering just in an enormous way, particularly in those communities that are fire prone. And I guess one of the things we really learned and really wanted to communicate in the film was that resilience starts in communities. Resilience is really about communities coming together, working together, making some, working with them within them to come up with ideas and strategies. And that's going to actually really help inform what the agencies that they're working with are going to do, what just all of those kinds of things are super critical to move forward together. And I think that's one of the key things, is that community is the key, kind of this bottom-up notion that if we work together. And that's one of the things that it was just so profound about watching Elizabeth and Yurok tribe do the cultural fire, was that, they just had such a beat on doing this work coming from a tradition of, millennia, that it was inspiring to see, and that I think we can all take a lesson from. So I just felt like, as much as anything, what we learned was how there is possibility, there is hope, there is opportunities, and it's really up to all of us to take that step.
One thing that we learned has to do with the efficacy of prescribed fire in reducing the virulence of megafires. We saw this with the rim fire, which lost its power and became actually an ecologically beneficial fire as it went from the Stanislaus National Forest into Yosemite National Park, where they've been doing many more prescribed burns. We did a shoot farther south in the Sequoia National Forest and Sequoia National Park area, where the same thing happened. A major wildfire in the national forest became ecologically beneficial when it entered an area that it had extensive and systematic prescribed burns. Right now, the bootleg fire in Oregon is ecologically beneficial in some areas where the Karuk tribe and the Nature Conservancy have been burning. So that's very significant. We also, and the point of the film, one of the last narrations, is that our thinking really has to change with regard to wildfire. And we encountered in making the film two very vested approaches to fire that were sort of were opposites, and that I think we had to contend with. One of them, the silviculturist approach, which says, let's plant trees, they're commercially valuable, let's put in as many as possible. And of course, that creates a continuous amount of vegetation that allows the fires to spread over very large areas. The other is the opposite, which is an outdated John Muir philosophy that nature is good and nothing should be done to manage the forest at all, and that these wildfires just let them burn. And if they destroy old growth forests, that's fine. We'll have snag forests. Well, I think it's pretty clear that burning has to occur, that some trimming of vegetation needs to happen so that there isn't so much dense vegetation in the forests. And people really need to rethink their relationship with fire, both some of the professionals, but also communities who are faced with wildfire for the first time.
Thank you. So Nick and Elizabeth, a question for you guys. You know, as we're in fire season, and as fire season seems to be just getting longer and longer, what are some things that the average citizen can do to prepare for fire season, to protect themselves? Just some tips and tricks that the average person can do to kind of be aware of fire season and what they need to know.
Elizabeth, I'll go first if you don't mind.
Go ahead, Nick. Absolutely.
Okay, I think starting at maybe the global level and then kind of focusing down from there, the partnerships and the collaboration with the different communities that Kevin and Elizabeth have been speaking to, that's not only does that create resiliency, but also creates prevention, right? Which is a big deal. The fire that never starts is the one that's easiest to put out. Yeah. And so, but I think if you're thinking about individuals, obviously reaching out to their neighbors and making sure that they're aware of what's going on in their community and building those partnerships so that they can create some space between their where they live and where this continuous fuel bed of forest is around. So if that's, you know, weed eating a lot of the taller grasses and figuring out how best to do that in a way that keeps the fire danger from, or the fire to be able to just continuously march up and slam against people's houses is a very important thing. Also, having a plan of evacuation, actually practicing, how am I going to get out of this area? Because the one thing in some of these more rural areas is road condition. And, a lot of times it's narrow roads. There's one way in, one way out, and that's not always going to be the way that's the least dangerous. A road that goes right down a canyon or a big draw, you're going to find yourself probably coming face to face with the fire as it's running up to meet you. And that's a bad place to be, and figuring out what those, where the safer way is to get out of these places. And then making sure that you have, some supplies at the ready, particularly things that are harder to get, like medications and maybe some food and water and stuff like that. And having that in a place that either you can just grab and go, or that it's actually in your car, so that when it's time to go, you're ready to go. And then too, if you have the opportunity available to you to sign up for like an automatic alerting system, then by all means do so that you can get that notification as soon as possible. I'll tell you, it's super, super sad when these fires impact these areas where people live and they lose their homes and they lose their belongings. But it's a tragedy when people lose their lives to doing this. So stuff can be replaced to some extent, but people cannot ever. And the most important thing is to, heed those evacuation warnings and enact your plan and get on with it. Thank you.
Yeah, I definitely like to echo what Nick had to say. One of the greatest things we've done out here is our executive director, Margot Robbins, is the head of Native Education for the Klamath Trinity Unified School District. We teach our children from Head Start all the way through high school about fire. We do presentations in the schools. I've found one of the greatest tools we have is teaching our young people, because they are going to tell their parents, we need to protect our home. We need to protect grandma's home. We need to protect our community. And little kids are relentless. They don't let up. They want you to know that they want to be protected and that we need to do that. I start sending out notifications prior to fire season about having a go bag ready, having enough water and food on hand, making sure you're, cleared around your home. Our crew, our fires and fuels reduction crew, goes out, they clean around all of these, vulnerable places. And, they make sure to, through our waste burning, we show them how to properly prepare around their home to burn. We help them put in a fire line. We tell them what they need. We bring tools and equipment and we stand by to assist them. We have the family light, and we teach them what to do. And through that education, we're able to get our community fire ready. You're never really going to be 100% fire ready, but if you make that effort up front and you have everything you need, it makes the emergency services easier for everybody. The Yurok tribe has a really great OES system where, they go out and check on the elders. They provide water buffaloes up and down the extension of the reservation in case, water is needed. Our local fire people always have their slip-ons in their vehicles. We always have our equipment ready because we're an hour and a half from any large entity that's going to be able to get here to help us. So we are really our only resource until they arrive. We have to make that effort to get everybody involved, educated, and boots ready, as I like to say. We're all ready to jump and run at any moment.
Great, thank you. Another question that we had in the chat was, what can citizens do to advocate for prescription burns? Is there anything that the average person can do to help further this cause?
I always like to tell people that, our people in Congress are the ones that we need to talk to, the people in charge of all the funding. The fire agencies are suffering right now. Their staff are overworked, they're underpaid. I'm sure everybody knows this already, but, get a hold of your Congress people, get a hold of, the governor if you have to. Explain to them, for us, I live completely off grid. So people show up in my driveway if there's something going on, you know, if I have my cell boost shut off or my Wi-Fi shut off, they show up here and I instantly get on and start notifying people. But, you know, not everybody's that proactive. You know, we all need to make that effort to take care of each other and, you know, realize where you're living. If you're in an old fire footprint that historically burns every 50 or so years, pay attention to that. You know, pay attention to your environment. That is the greatest thing you can do.
Yeah. And so if anybody has any other questions, go ahead and put them in the chat window. And I'm just going to finish up with, it's kind of a silly question, but for all of our panel discussion members, with your job, you know, filmmaking, cultural fire, Humble Bay Fire, what's your least favorite part of your job and what's your favorite part of your job?
Well, the least favorite part of my job is fundraising. And actually, everybody, you're seeing articles all the time, TV programs about wildfires. But when we started out in 2014, the people who fund documentaries thought this was not an interesting subject. You know, wildfires in the woods, who cares if they're getting bigger? You know, there's very much an urban bias. And people who fund films started to take it seriously only with the wine country wildfires. In fact, we had run out of funding and Kevin and I decided, well, we have to just pack this up and go into post-production one Sunday night in September 2017. Or was it August? I don't remember the exact date anymore. But the next day, there were 17 fires. Actually, that night, that Sunday night, 17 fires burned in 6 counties. And we knew we had to go back into production. So I called a woman who had given us some money and I said, Mary Lou, I hate to come back to you. You've been so generous, but we have to go back into production. We just don't have time to, you know, go to foundations and so on. And she said, I evacuated my house yesterday. So she helped us out. She gave us a house party and we were able to bring the film up to date. But it's a difficult thing. It's always difficult to raise money for documentaries. And sometimes when you're a little ahead of the curve in terms of public awareness, it's extremely difficult.
What's your favorite part? Oh, go ahead.
I was just going to say one of my favorite parts, and I suspect Steve's too, is events like this. Being able to go, we've had, I don't know, 400 or 500 community screenings, and we've been able to participate in many of them. And we've been blessed to have Elizabeth and Kelly Martin and Malcolm and some of the folks that are Mike Shukin that are in our film also participate. And it's really nice as a filmmaker to feel like work you put into a film can have impact. And I feel like we've had some of those moments. We got great response on PBS. We got a lot of notes and letters and emails and stuff. So, you know, it feels good when you feel like you are, you know, achieving what you set out to do. There could always be more, but, you know, I think that, you know, conversations like this go a long ways in helping communities figure out strategies to move forward with respect to wildfire. So I just feel like that is that's probably the number one benefit and the thing that I mean, really as filmmakers, we live for. So.
Elizabeth, I'm going to pick on you next. What's your least favorite and your favorite part of your position?
My least favorite is all the paperwork and the permits. I'm not gonna lie. Those things take me all year long to make sure I have everything in place, you know, the burn permits, the burn plans, the smoke permits, you know, all the permissions from the local agencies. Those things are really difficult. My favorite part is, obviously these presentations, they're amazing to be able to get the word out to people. And the end result, recently I took some journalists out into a burn that we did in March to be able to look at all the new food and medicine and the basket materials that have came out. We have ethnobotanists that go in and replant our burned areas with native seeds. So we're trying to remove the invasive species and bring the native plants back. Cultural fire has grown so much in these 8 years that, we started out to burn basket materials. And now we are, restoring our environment. We're supporting our elders, our community. We're providing traditional foods and medicines, replanting our prairies and our meadows, reintroducing elk. Those are my favorite things, being able to bring that back.
Great, thank you. All right, Nick.
Yeah, no surprises here. I'm with you, Elizabeth. Sometimes the paperwork side of this, I'm a firefighter, not a paperwork fighter. So, that can be a bit of a drag. And, historically, my answer to my favorite thing would be, obviously, anytime I get to go to work, it's not a good thing, but it's a great way to feel like you're making a difference. But now, sort of as I'm maybe maturing a little bit, it's situations like this where I can reach out to the community in a facilitated way and spread some knowledge and make sure build some relationships within the community so that they have a better idea of what's going on and how they can better prepare themselves or react when I do get to go out and do my job.
Great, thank you.
You're welcome.
So that is the end of my questions. So unless anybody has any other questions they want to put in the chat, I will go ahead and let you guys go. Thank you again to all of our panel members. Thank you for taking the time on your Saturday to talk with us. Everybody here has my email. So if you think of any questions or anything like that, or need any information, please contact me and let me know. Again, I'll be sending out an email that has the Vimeo link if you want to revisit the documentary, the YouTube recording of this panel discussion, and a quick survey that if you could please fill out, that'd be really great. It just really helps Kevin and Stephen with their projects and other filmmakers and other projects out there. And with that note, unless anybody has any parting words.
Thank you,
I
Cora.
just want to thank you again, Corin. I just want to thank you
Yeah.
again and really appreciate it. And if you want to reach Steve or I, you can go to wilderthanwildfilm.org and reach out to us there. There's lots of information, a lot of a resource section that has a lot of material about, defensible space and all kinds of things like that as well. So again, thank you so much.
Okay. Thank you. Everybody stay safe out there.
Okay.
Okay. And yeah, see you later. Thank you.
All right. Bye.
Thank you.